more popular training methods in the last 10 years, and it's been around longer than that, but in the last 10 years is looking at tempo training. And so really accentuating the eccentric portion of a lift. So that might be like the descent of a back squat. Dr. Miller with some insight and some opinion on whether this type of training is really effective for strength gains, hypertrophy gains, and power. Is it any better than just traditional straight reps, not worrying about tempo, at least on the eccentric side in particular? And so there's not a tremendous amount of research literature on this. There is some, and in some of my opinion mixed in. So you take these two things as such. My experience as a coach in particular, seeing this utilized. So you might do a cycle, let's say, for 1 to 2 weeks that is eccentric focused. So you might do 2 weeks of 4-second ride down back squats, and with the idea of coming up as fast as possible, minimizing the isometric time. And so you might do that for a cycle or two, or whatever. Is that more effective than doing just traditional cadence? Well, when we talk about cycle to cycle, what I've seen, what the research literature shows, is that initially that extra time under tension, that time that is elongated in the eccentric side, does cause more muscle damage. It probably causes more muscle adaptation in terms of you've stretched the muscle under a long period of time, that's damaged the fibers. But when the muscle adapts, which takes about 2 weeks if you're a trained person, that effect then is now covered by the repeated bout effect. So the repeated bout effect then is predicated on you have a novel movement, and then you have some sort of damaging exercise, and then after that you don't get damaged again for about 4 weeks, unless you do something else that's different. It's like a lateral squat or something like that. Your adductors will get fried, right? And so what tends to happen with that eccentric type of activity is for 2 weeks it could be really effective because it causes a novel stimulus and kind of unique muscle damage, if that's such a thing, right? But after that time, 2 weeks passed, then the loading that's used during that type of training is no longer sufficient. And because the time under tension is longer, if you think about volume, you have to reduce the reps. Like you can't do the same load for 10 reps with 4-second ride downs as you would without those 4-second ride downs. Okay? If you're looking at strength, you have to reduce the load in order to do a 4-second ride down for your set of 6 than you would a traditional set of 6 at that same, using that same percentage, the same load, right? You have to reduce the load. That's the whole point too, is that, well, we can do less load and get better results at the same results. Well, in a short term, yes. In the long term, though, you're going to have to, build the load to get stronger, the intensity, or you're going to have to build the volume out, in particular, to gain skeletal muscle hypertrophy. And if you're not doing either one of them, then you're not going to get strength, and you're not going to build hypertrophy. So what I would say is eccentric or time under tempo training is effective for a short burst. If it's used like on a full week, it's like 2 full weeks of this type of training. So that would be my opinion, and some of the research we've seen is you still have to overstimulate. You have to stimulate the muscle, or don't overstimulate. You have to stimulate the muscle so it'll grow. And if you don't have a stimulation that's sufficient, then it's not going to grow. So, if you have a stimulant, whether it's extended volume or extended load. Okay, what about in a weekly cycle if you're just incorporating on a day of the week? This could be a good idea because it still remains somewhat of a novel stimulus. For example, you might do a maximal day on one day, 80-85%, normal tempo, up fast, all those things. And then the other day, because our high-low sequence is supported over and over again, this idea of high-low is a good one, especially when it comes to strength and power development. And so I do high-low in the sense that, 85% one day and then low the next. So I might do a speed day at 60% of that with that same exercise. It's probably a compound movement we're talking about. It most certainly is a compound movement. But I can either do that with emphasis on speed, maybe pauses and things like come up fast. So I'm working really on the concentric side of the lift. Or I could do some of the eccentric elongation cycles or even isometric. So extending the time under tension in either one of those phases. I wouldn't do it on the concentric side, but either the eccentric, which would be more common, or the isometric. And that could be a nice high-low type of system. You'll get some muscle damage initially, but you won't get it as much after that. The speed of movement, besides providing that stimulus, that time under tension stimulus is enhanced, right? More time under tension. Is that you can work on techniques. So let's say you back squat heavy on Monday and you're a weightlifter, Olympic style weightlifter. Now you might do front squats with time under tension with a little bit lighter load to work on your posture perhaps. So that could be a nice sequence there. And, in the long run, that could be fine, especially once you adapt. Just keep in mind that you probably don't want, when I say long run, it could be like a couple cycles. You probably wouldn't want to keep doing that over and over again necessarily, just because the load isn't sufficient to push anything. Like you're going to get good at that tempo. You're going to do a good light day, so a nice recovery day, posture. It's possible you get some skeletal muscle hypertrophy supplemented to the other day. So if we're talking about hypertrophy day, you might have your heavier volume day, your more expansive volume day. On the other day, instead of a maximal day, you have your high repetition day, right? And this is more of a supplementary type of day, recovery/supplementary type of day. That could fit that mold very, very well. And it could be used, say, again, long term, that could be a couple cycles. But then still, like, okay, well, let's get back to business now and do volume across the week and just changing exercises in the high-low scheme again. All right, that percentage-based scheme. It's just my opinion in seeing this fleshed out. I've tried, like, the triphasic method, which I think is effective, but usually only is effective, at least in my experience, with trained individuals for one cycle. It's very effective. It's a nice bump. It's a nice variety piece for one cycle. But after that, the loading is just not enough, at least the way I did it. Okay, the loading is not enough on those elongated eccentric and isometric time is not enough to see continual change as compared to just your traditional straight set regular cadence. Okay, just some thoughts. If you think I'm crazy, comment in the bottom. Subscribe to my channel for more videos on all kinds of things in diet, nutrition, and sports and exercise science. Again, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments as well, and I'll take a look at them, do my best to answer them. Again, a little bit of mix of research literature and opinion, so don't take this as gospel, but those are some thoughts I had on it. I know many people are incorporating this type of training into their training programming.